Good morning, everyone. Hey, it's good to see you. If you're a guest this morning, we're so glad that you're here to worship with us. As a church, it's our vision to connect people to Jesus and love our community. Part of connecting to Jesus is sometimes taking maybe different steps or uncomfortable steps to grow in knowing who Jesus is or growing in our relationship with Him. And I know you've already heard about it in the announcement video, but I really want to encourage you. In your bulletin is this list of classes that start next Sunday. They happen during the 9:30 hour, and so this is not a, hey, skip church and go to a class. It's, hey, go to a class and stay for the 11 or come for the 8. Something like that. But to take a step to grow, maybe we're not sure where the Bible came from or why it's important, or have questions about the Bible, then there's classes for you. Or maybe you're going through a struggle, trying to find God in the middle of something and wondering where He's at, then there's a class. If you want to go to classes, those classes, as well as the Bible study that we're kind of starting fresh, those are classes for you. If you don't want to go to class with your spouse or don't have a spouse, then there's a men's class and a women's class. Everything is starting new, and so it's a perfect opportunity for you to jump in because you're not going to be behind. You're not going to walk into this group of people that they're all best friends. And so really want to encourage you to take an opportunity to do that. Also starting next Sunday night is Financial Peace University. It's on Sunday night because we have childcare here with all of our kids ministry stuff, and so you can sign up. There's a link on this paper. You need to sign up ahead of time to order materials for that, but very much would encourage you if you're having money struggles or just wondering what's next with your finances, that's a perfect opportunity for you to step into. Today, we are wrapping up this series called The Problem of God. We've been looking together over the last several weeks of some of the problems that hold people up from believing in God. Some of the questions or the hurdles that keep people from really not just following God and not just believing in God, but trusting in the truth of God. And we have looked at we've talked about the existence of God. How do we know that God exists? We've talked about the hypocrisy of Christians and when we live one way and claim the other, the disconnect that creates for people. We've looked at the difficulty of pain and suffering and how can a loving God who is so good allow such bad things to happen. And we have reconciled these problems with both reason and God's truth. And today, as we look at one of the last problems, and there are more out there, but the last one of this series, this is maybe one of the more pinpointed problems. It's the problem of exclusivity. And before you check out, because that's a big word, and trust me, I dealt with it all week. It's a big word. Okay, before we check out, here's the problem. Is that there is a problem for a lot of people, Jesus' claim that there is only one way to salvation in heaven. And for a lot of culture who are outside of Jesus and outside of Christianity, that truth is a problem. It's a problem for trusting in God because there are so many people outside of that one way. I'm going to pray and then we're going to jump in. God, I'm so thankful for today. I'm thankful for those that are in the room or those that have been or will be this morning. God, I'm thankful for your church. God, this place that you created for us as imperfect people to meet and to learn about your truth and to be an encouragement to one another. And God, some of us in the room I know are going through a good season of life, and I know others are going through a difficult season of life. But God, we meet here today recognizing that we have one another to point one another towards you. And so God, I pray that we can be an encouragement. I pray that we can be a smile or a hug for someone in the room. God, I pray that your truth this morning, it won't just be words that we hear and it won't just be lessons that we learn, but I pray that it will be something that shapes our lives. God, I pray this morning that while your truth is real, and God, at times, who we are backing it up is difficult. And so, Lord, I pray that we will not just see your truth, but we will see the way that it affects our lives. God, I'm thankful this morning that as a room full of people who made mistakes this past week and are filled with sin, we can worship with the hope of heaven because of the freedom that you offer us through the cross. It's in your name we pray. Amen. There's a lot of times we get a lot of different phone calls here at the church, and some of them are asking for utility help, and some of them are just asking a basic question. Some of them are for Tri-County behind us because they're not sure which phone number to dial. We get all kinds of phone calls, but there's one phone call in almost 11 years of being here that stands above all of the others. the administrative assistant came into my office and said, Matt, there's someone on the phone call that has a question for you. I said, okay, great. Who is it? I'm not really sure. Okay, do you know what their question is? Nope, I sure don't. Okay. And so it's kind of a wild card walking in. So I pick up the phone and I said, hi, this is Matt. How can I help you? And they said, well, I have a question. I said, great. They said, I'm sitting here at work and I have a question about the Bible. As a preacher, I'm thinking, man, this is what I do. I try so hard, and now they're calling me with this question. Like, okay, here we go. I quickly find out that they did not have questions about the Bible. That this was a bait and switch towards confrontation. And as the questions started to roll in, my answers were twisted and thrown back at me. And they were not questions about the truth of God. They were not questions about the hope of Jesus. They were questions that were trying to be turned around to attack me. And so while I listened and tried to remain polite, after about 30 minutes, Justin walked by my office and I kind of motioned him to come in, and I put on speakerphone so we could all enjoy this. And the individual that was on the other end of this line just began to attack. And it wasn't just like, I disagree with you, or you're dumb for believing in this. Like, I could handle that. But he began to ask where I went to college and insulted my choice of college, telling me it was a waste of money. He began to insult my profession and what I do for a living, and telling me that there's no way I can take care of my family. He then began to ask about my parenting and began to ask all of these questions. And I thought to myself, am I on trial? And I took it for a long time. Like when he began to insult me just as an individual. And okay, I'm fine with that. And then he began to insult our church, which upset me. But I let it go. And then he began to insult my wife and my kids. And I know that I'm supposed to turn another cheek. But after a while, I ran out of cheeks. All right? And I was done. Like when he brought up my kids, I was like, man, I'm going to help you meet Jesus face to face here in about 2 seconds. Like coming through the phone. Here we go. Like I was done. And Justin's just shaking his head, sitting there. And I mean, I was taken back because now I've literally wasted an hour of my day listening and being attacked about all of these different things and about all of these questions that they supposedly had about the Bible. And I finally just said, I'm done. It's obvious you did not call here for any other reason than to argue, and I'm done arguing, and I hung up the phone. And I thought to myself Justin and I had a conversation afterwards, and it was kind of disbelief. But as I think back to that conversation more, even if I wanted to believe something that individual said on the phone, which I didn't, but even if I wanted to, even if they said something that was remotely true or connected in some way to my life, if something that they said was believable, like their belief system, I would never, ever want to adhere to that truth and that belief system. Why? Because if that belief system and that truth points towards that behavior, I don't want anything to do with it. And neither would you, right? Like if someone calls you and just insults every part of your life, you're probably not saying to them, hey, where can we hang out? This has been fun. Right? Like that's not your response. It's not my response, okay? There was nothing at the end of that conversation that was positive, including my thoughts about this individual. There was nothing, even if I wanted to believe something that was true or something was true about what they were saying, I would never want to adhere to it. I never want to bring my life face to face with that because of the behavior of those presenting it. And while it seems absolutely ridiculous, and none of us would want to jump in and say, yeah, that sounds great. At times as Christians, we're just as bad. We assault people on Facebook for their beliefs or difference in beliefs, and we never bring a face or a voice to the conversation, just our fingertips. We slander people who think differently than us, and we exclude everybody else who is different in any way. And then somehow, and this is not just Crossroads, this is church as a whole, and then somehow after doing all of that, we think to ourselves that the next time that we have a big church invite event, all of those people are going to want to show up. Like, hey, I've been a jerk to you for the last 3 months. We're having this carry-in dinner. It'll be great for you to come to. It's never going to happen. At times, we're just as bad because of our belief system and because of our truth. This morning, as we look at this problem that the church and Jesus is exclusive, there's two terms that I need us to all understand together. And they're bigger words, and I don't want you to check out. That's why I'm giving easy definitions, okay? The first term is inclusive. Inclusive. That means if we have a big circle of life, everybody is included in the circle. No matter what you believe, no matter what you hold on to, no matter how you shape your life, everybody is included in the circle. That is inclusive. Exclusive means that there's just one party in the middle of the circle and everybody else is outside of the circle. Okay, so if we're talking about beliefs or truths that are inclusive, it means that everybody gets to come to the party. If we're talking about exclusive, it means that there is just one group that is in the middle of the circle. They are coming to the party and everybody else is outside of the circle. And so why is it that Jesus is seen as exclusive? And why is this a problem for so many people? The reason that Jesus is seen as exclusive is because of his very words in John chapter 14. In John chapter 14, Jesus is talking with his disciples, and he is given a question, and then he gives an answer. Here's what it says, John chapter 14, beginning in verse 5. It says, Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way? Jesus answered, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. You see, Thomas asked a question that many of us have probably asked, or we have had relatives ask, or in the craziness of life, we have thought in our head, how do we know what is the right way? Like with all the beliefs that are out there and all the denominations that are out there and all the different religions that are out there and all the self-help books that we can find on Amazon or the shelves at Walmart, all of the different ideas that Oprah or Dr. Phil want to throw out there to make life right and say, this is the way. What is the right way? What is it? Where's the direction that we are supposed to head? And Thomas asked this question. He says, hey, if we're not sure, what is the way? And Jesus, in his words, he answers exclusively, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And no one comes to the Father except through me. You see, while Jesus' words are 100% true, they are also extremely confrontational. You see, Jesus states here that there is only one way to heaven, and there is only one way to salvation, and that is through him. Now, why is that a problem? Well, when we deduce it, it means everybody outside of Jesus is what? Is lost. Everyone outside of Jesus, if this is the only way, then everybody outside of that way is lost. Which means that if in our culture, if you are a Jewish person or a Muslim person or a Buddhist person, if you adhere to any of these other beliefs and then someplace in between, then you are outside of the circle. How many of us want to be outside the circle? None. And so we live in a culture that while the statement is polarizing, we would much rather adhere to something different in our life that includes everybody, because then nobody is left out. Nobody likes to be the last kid picked in kickball, right? And that transcends all the way through our lives. You see, this statement to those outside of Jesus is alienating. Not just Jesus' words, Peter's words in Acts chapter 4. Acts chapter 4, verse 12, Peter says this, salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to mankind of which we must be saved. You see, it's not just Jesus' words, and now it's Peter's words that, hey, how am I saved? Is it, this party over here, this party over here, this party over here? And Peter plainly, black and white, says, no, it's only found through Jesus. There's no other way to be saved. You see, what Peter does here is Peter, in one sentence, annihilates this idea that you and I, we live in, we don't even realize it, this idea of pluralism. Before you check out, pluralism is this idea that there's all different ways to God, and in the end, we're all just going to get there. And so it could be Christianity, or it could be Islam, or it could be other religions down the line. But there is one God, and we're all pointing towards him. A lot of times the illustration is that of our planets. And we live on planet Earth, and there's all these other planets, and they all move around, and they all make up the solar system. There's a lot of people that believe that this is the idea of God. It's this pluralism idea where there's multiple ideas that all get to God. And when Peter says this, Peter more or less drops all the other planets. He says, no. And while that claim may be more inclusive to make everybody else feel better, and so no one is picked last, it stands in contrast to Jesus' words. You see, this belief of pluralism can't be held by Jesus' people because of Jesus' words. But here's the thing. While Jesus' claim is exclusive, it does not mean that his people, you and I, get to exclude everyone. Just because we disagree with someone's belief does not mean that we get to be hateful and hurtful to the same person. And while the truth of Jesus is exclusive, it does not mean that his people get to be exclusive, arrogant bigots. I mean, truth be told, the cross is confrontational enough. It is scandalous. It is unexplained at times. Jesus does not need our help being confrontational. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, Paul says, "But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews and foolishness to the Gentiles." You see, at times the truth of Christianity, the truth of the gospel, the truth of the cross will confront other people's lives. And it's not our job in that moment to smooth things over so everybody feels better. In that moment, it's our job to remind them of the truth of the gospel. You see, the cross is confrontational enough. It won't make sense to people. It will be difficult for other people. Why? Because the cross calls for life change. The truth of Jesus, that I'm the way, the truth, and the life, it calls us to life change. It's not that his words are confrontational. It's what it calls for in our lives that begins to become confrontational. Our job is to show people that they matter and that Jesus died for them too. I love the way that Ed Stetzer, a Christian writer and speaker, he puts it this way. Our culture grants exclusivity where it sees value. In other words, people need to see a church that values them as people before they will find value in the truth of Jesus. People need to see a church that values them as people before they find value in the truth of Jesus. Just an honest question. You and I, as followers of Jesus, we have been called to do what? To go and make disciples. That is Jesus' call for our lives. But here's the honest question. How can we lead anyone in discipleship if we exclude everyone from friendship? How can we lead anyone in being a disciple of Jesus and what that means for their life if we have excluded everyone from friendship because they're different? Because they believe something different. And I'm not saying that we water down our beliefs, and I'm not saying that we let go of the truth of Jesus. I'm here to tell you that there is only one way for salvation, and that is through Jesus. But what it does mean is that we can treat people like humans. It does mean that we can love people who are different than us. It does mean that as Jesus' people who have been given grace, we can live with grace to those who are different. Our truth for this morning is this. The exclusive truth of Jesus is an invitation for everyone. It's not just for our little Christian pocket that all looks the same and talks the same and understands the same. The invitation of the exclusive truth of Jesus, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. That is an invitation for everyone. Everyone is invited to the party. It's up to us of whether or not we choose to adhere our lives to that truth. Everyone is invited to this truth. It's will we choose to follow it with our lives. It does not exclude, it does not push everyone else outside. It invites everyone, but it calls for us to step away from our sin, to step away from this world, to step away from our lives, and pursue what Jesus calls us to. You see, the truth is that you and I are the invitation for people. You and I, we are the invitation that invites people to the truth of Jesus. And so this morning, what does your invitation look like? When a kid gets invited to a birthday party, they get an invitation. Sometimes it's crisp and clean, like it just came right off the printer. Sometimes the invitation comes to you and you can tell it's been in the kid's backpack for like a week, right? Like, oh, I forgot to give this to you. My mom told me to. It's like all beat up on the corners and it's folded in half. And for some of us, that's what life looks like. Our invitation to Jesus is beat up and tired. Sometimes you get an invitation to a kid's birthday party and you open it up and there's like 2 details inside. And as a parent, you're like, where are you going? What are you doing? Other than just be there at 6. Like, you see, for some of us, our invitation is pretty empty when it comes to knowledge because we've never grown in it. We've never studied, we've never learned. And so for us to be the invitation to a broken world, for us to be an invitation to a world that has all these problems with God, we don't have any information to bring to the table. And so our invitation is pretty much blank on the inside. What does your invitation look like? You see, the exclusive truth of Jesus is an invitation for everyone. That invitation is given through you and me. What does your invitation look like? As people who have been called to go and to make disciples, have we excluded everybody? And so now we have no one to invite? Oh, they believe this, and so, nah, I'm not going to go. And they live like this, and so, nah, I'm not going to. And they think this, nah, I'm not going to. Their kids are like, nah, I'm not going to. And we've excluded everybody. And so now we have no one to invite. The truth of Jesus, it does not fall apart. It does not disappear because it's uncomfortable for those who are outside of it. But it does live and breathe in you and me. That Jesus is the only way. And our lives are called to back that up. The exclusive truth of Jesus is an invitation for everyone. This morning, who are you inviting? This morning, who are you helping find that truth? Back before we moved up here, we were living in a house in Joplin. And it was a Sunday afternoon. I had preached in this small church in Kansas. And I was tired. Emily and I, we had driven back. And we were sitting in the living room. We were just watching TV. Weren't doing anything. I was in gym shorts and a cutoff t-shirt. All of a sudden, someone knocks on the door. And I was not expecting anybody to knock on our door at all. But I went to the door and I opened it. And there was a lady, and she was standing there holding something that looked like a Bible. And I thought, oh boy. And I opened the door and I said, can I help you? And she said, yeah, I was wondering if you had a minute to have a conversation. I said, sure. So I stepped out on our front porch. And I said, what's going on? And she said, well, I have some truth that I'd like to share with you. And then she began to kind of ramble on about her truth. And it wasn't ramble, it was just a couple minutes. And then she looked back at me, and this is my favorite question I always get. What do you do for a living? Well, I bag groceries. I look back at her and I said, well, I'm just getting ready to graduate to be a preacher of church. Oh. Well, is there anything that I said that sounds interesting? I thought, what does she mean by interesting here? And I thought, well, I said, well, it sounds interesting, but I don't believe it. And she said, well, why don't you believe it? And so then I began to explain to her some of the things that she said that I disagreed with, and here's the reasons why. And she said, oh, okay. She said, let me tell you about. And then she went into some more details of her belief system. And we did this for probably 10 minutes or so, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And if I'm going to be real honest with you, I was tired. I didn't really want to have the conversation in the first place. But she wanted to have a conversation, so I had the conversation. And we finally reached the point, and I just looked at her. I said, ma'am, I said, here's the thing. I said, I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree. I said, what I want you to know is that I love you and I commend your courage to randomly knock on doors and share your beliefs and your truth. I said, because there's a lot of churches and a lot of Christian people that would never do that. I said, so I commend your courage. I said, but we're just going to have to agree to disagree because I don't see this going anywhere where you're going to change your beliefs or I'm going to change mine. And she just kind of stared at me for a second. I thought, what'd I say? And she said, I think you're right. She said, most people don't respond like this. And in my head, the side of me that was just wanting to stay on the couch was, I didn't really want to respond this way either. But she said, most people don't respond this way. She said, so I think you're right. I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree. And I said, I feel like that's our best option. I said, because I don't see anything changing on either side. I said, but I appreciate you knocking on my door and having a conversation with me. And she said, have a great day. You see, that conversation ended drastically different than my phone call in the office back several years ago. You see, because one saw value in a person on both sides. We disagreed drastically on beliefs. I mean, opposite sides of the spectrum about Jesus. But we saw each other as humans. We saw each other as people. And I saw her as someone that was created in the image of God. And that the truth of Jesus does not say to exclude everyone who is different. The truth of Jesus does not say get rid of everybody that's different. The truth of Jesus says Jesus is the way and it's my job to invite. And part of me inviting is to be loving and gracious. That does not always mean tolerant, and it does not mean that I water down my beliefs. I held true to them as I talked to her, and I will not walk away from them. But it does not mean in those moments that I will treat those people at their worst. Because when Jesus looked down at you and me from across, he could have seen us at our worst, and he didn't. He saw us as people that had value and as people that had a purpose and people that were created in the image of his Father, which is why he was willing to go to a cross for you and me. All of the problems of sin in our life, all of our arrogance and all of our bigotry, all of our shame, he took to the cross and he said, I love them and they have value and they are people and they are made in the image of God. You see, your job and my job is to be the invitation to the kingdom of Jesus that does not exclude and does not push away, but does not let go of the truth of the gospel and does not let go of the cross. Because the exclusive truth of Jesus is an invitation for everyone. This morning, who are you inviting? This morning, what is the condition of your invitation? This morning, have you forgotten about the truth of Jesus? And if you have, you're not pushed away and you're not ignored. This morning, you're invited to a party. Let's go ahead and stand together. We're going to spend some time in worship. This time in our service is a time where music connects to what's going on in our heart to Jesus. It's an opportunity for us to express, and maybe things that we can't with words, what Jesus is calling us to. And for some of us, it's not the truth that Jesus is exclusive, it's what it means for our lives. That's where it becomes confrontational. It means that there's a lifestyle change that is called for. It means that there's something different in our life that has to reprioritize and has to shift. We're finding that Jesus is the only way, but it becomes confrontational when it means I have to let go and give up and sacrifice and surrender. But this morning, that truth and that way is the only way to the freedom of Christ. The truth of Jesus is only found at the foot of the cross. When we bring ourselves to that moment, as we worship, As we worship, for some of us, our invitation is empty, or some of us, it's worn out. For some of us, our invitation to the kingdom of Jesus has no information, or it's just blank because we've never taken the time to grow in our relationship with Jesus. And maybe this morning as we worship, it's Jesus. Help me to be the invitation you need to your truth. For some of us, we've pushed away from the truth of Jesus because of what it calls for in our lives. We don't want to give up, and we don't want to let that go, and we like to do that, so we're not going to give up. And maybe this morning, it's not what it sounds like, it's what it calls for in our life. That as we worship, it's Jesus, help me to let go of this. Help me to let go of this struggle. Help me to let go of this selfishness. Help your truth be true in my life. This morning as we worship, the exclusive truth of Jesus, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me, is an invitation that's found in our lives for everyone.